All right, hang on. Okay, I think we are live.
We are live. Well, that's exciting. It's awesome to be here this week for Thursdays with Culture Talk. I'm Teresa Agresta. I'm actually talking to you from Queensbury, New York today. And Cynthia Forstman, Culture Talk partner out in Denver, Colorado. And we are very excited to welcome Christopher Stratford from Toulouse, right? And you've moved. Are you still in Toulouse, Christopher? In France?
Just north of Toulouse, that's right, in France.
Okay.
But I'm not originally from Toulouse.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about where you are from, because this is going to be a really exciting conversation that really has tentacles and reaches into many different countries, based on what I know about Chris's background.
Yeah, well, I was born in Canada, and like many people from North and South America, my background is actually rooted in different nationalities. So my mother's French, my father's English Canadian, and I always grew up with these, this dual national pull in two directions, finding out which of me was actually the French side, which of me was actually the Canadian side. And I guess it's this fascination with the difference that drew me to explore culture as an engineer, first of all, working with the UN. And after a few years working with the UN, I came to New York actually and did an MBA and left there going to Europe, I guess, to find out about my roots in France. And I came just before the Berlin Wall came down. So it became a fantastic opportunity.
Exciting times.
And so most of the 90s were spent in Central and Eastern Europe. And that was, again, a discovery of culture. And the work that I was doing wasn't so much technical, but more institutional and management related. So, and that's where my interest in intercultural management and another story is, of course, I experienced a failed merger, which which was an interesting experience. But when I quit that job, I joined a management company that said, I know what not to do. So
yeah, it's nothing like being in the middle of a really challenging cultural experience to identify with the things that you'd rather not repeat.
Yeah. So in the work that I've been doing, in fact, it's always a question of trying to find out what is the most interesting element of the culture I'm exploring, whether it's a corporate culture or a national culture or a functional culture. And a lot of the work I do actually combines those different cultural aspects. In diagnostic work, a lot of the work is related to team building, or coaching or counseling people of how to get the best out of the diversity. So I've been working as an independent actually for 25 years.
And you never did come back to Canada, except for to visit, right? Or did you?
Yeah, well, having started my career in Africa, I felt that 6 months of winter was a bit long.
This is true. Very big difference there.
But no, I think I'm happily settled in southwestern France, and it's a beautiful part of the world, and there's lots of activity. Of course, Airbus is based here in Toulouse. Their headquarters is here. I do a lot of work with them, but I work in all sectors, and have had the good fortune of working in 90 countries and more.
Right. So, now tell me, this cultural aspect is so fascinating with regard to the layers of culture.
I was going to use the same word, like just hearing your introduction, like all the different layers that have a cultural component.
Well, I see culture really in everything that I do. I mean, I see the reactions of people. When I came to France, everything seemed so different, although I had exposure to French culture through my mother. Now, when I go back to Canada, I see there's a difference between the way I have evolved in my own culture and and things seem, a bit strange for me coming back to my own country. So it's,
Your own, yeah.
I guess we're all a little bit like an immigrant at some point when it comes to change, whether we change jobs or we move somewhere, East Coast to West Coast, we become a little bit like an immigrant because an immigrant will always look a little bit differently at the existing environment. And so we're often confronted with trying to make sense of the difference and trying to survive, I guess, in the most positive way.
Yeah.
And I think if we take the immigrant perspective, it's kind of helpful in analyzing what's going on. First of all, you step outside, you actually feel as though there are things there that you would rather change, but or things actually that make you think about things you can change in yourself. So there's a lot of, I think, humility which is required when working across cultures. For me, that would be the one of the main perspectives that we need to adopt.
Yeah, I love that idea about the immigrant perspective, and it's if you can come to a new experience and have the awareness to approach it with that viewpoint, I think that would be a real benefit. I think so many people, when they're in that immigrant experience, don't take the time to develop the awareness and to ask questions. They are maybe just feeling, they're just living through it or moving through it, but having that awareness. And I wonder if that's when you come into an organization, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish through that multicultural immigrant experience viewpoint?
Well, it's actually a balance between what they're expecting of you. They're expecting answers and solutions and ideas coming from you. But in actual fact, when I come into a job like that, I need to do a lot of listening and a lot of capturing of what's going on. So there's that mix of what I can offer and what I can gather. And so I think that's when we really try and maximize the experience of the exchange. That's where I find CultureTalk is quite a fascinating tool. In my before learning about CultureTalk 3 years ago, I was always doing things a little bit ad lib, and just trying to use my own intuition and use previous experiences to feed what I was trying to do. And of course, there are a number of tools out there we can use, whether it's looking at national culture with Hofstede or Trompenaars, or looking at corporate culture with Quinn model or other models. We don't have a tool I think as diverse as CultureTalk, because it allows us to use the same archetypes, the same framework for both the corporate and the individual. And so this is where a topic such as culture, which is so fuzzy, really.
Yeah.
The thing about culture,
Good word for it.
It's never black or white. I think it's multicultural, but I think many people would say it's various shades of gray. It's difficult to express. It's difficult to put your finger on, what words describe our culture. I mean, from a Canadian perspective, we sometimes hesitate. Our neighbors, the Americans, are so sure about what it is to be an American, but we're somehow uncertain what it is to be a Canadian.
What it means to be a Canadian, yeah.
We value it, of course, but we hesitate sometimes.
Yeah.
So having that difficulty, and when you're working in a company, even for a long time, it's often difficult to put the words to express what it is in my company, in my team, in my department. And CultureTalk allows us to identify, I think, with elements that we can relate to.
Right.
And
it's that language, right? So that shared language piece, even when you have different languages.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, is that now that CultureTalk is actually translated into several languages, we can draw in international teams and work with them around a language that they understand and a framework that we can all share, kind of the framework, the archetypes. And that I find very helpful. Before working with CultureTalk, again, you know, one would always, I mean, I felt that I was always struggling to, I mean, we look at the corporate websites and we see the value statements, but often there's a kind of separation between what is stated on the web page and what people are living in the company.
The experience, right? How it feels to be here.
And when we enter a new environment, like when there's a merger, for example, there's that sense of discomfort somehow.
Yeah, fear, I would add, right? There's probably oftentimes, yeah.
Some of us, I mean, I thrive on that difference. I mean,
the unknown.
Well, the French have this wonderful word called dépaysement, which means the feeling you get when you're uprooted, when you're entering a new country. You feel, you know, that your reference frame is just all destroyed somehow. That does generate a lot of fear and discomfort, but I find it very exciting. So a new project, a new country, a new team, all of this is really an opportunity for discovery. What I feel is most interesting in CultureTalk is the fact that we can overcome the fear because we're sharing something.
Yeah.
When we share something in common, we relate to each other, we connect with each other. And once we do that, I guess the emotions are alive, and this allows us to explore, really.
Yeah, and you used a phrase when we spoke that I thought was really insightful. I'm going to repeat it. Just like you said, it liberates the cultural dialogue. Absolutely. And this idea that once I've identified and understand now what's going on here in this culture, it allows me to have a conversation about it. We have a shared language, but tell me about this liberate the cultural dialogue means from your perspective and your experience.
Well, I remember working on a merger with CultureTalk. While the team that had merged, the executive team that had merged together, half of the people were coming from Canada, half were European.
Right.
And in actual fact, they had gotten along well together, but up to a point, I mean, it's always a kind of formal setting somehow. And when you are able to speak about your person using the individual CultureTalk model, and then you talk about the corporation and the differences perhaps between corporation A and corporation B and how they do have things that are similar, then you really get beyond the formal, the kind of, let's say, hesitant way of speaking to each other. You are able, in fact, to really talk about things that are more human, more true.
Right. That have meaning, right? To the individuals.
To both individuals, in fact, because if we share, for example, an archetype, if we're both heroes or explorers or something like that, we're able to work together and find out what we can do together, in fact. Or if there's complementarity, it's the same. But the interesting point is to know what's behind those archetypes and what does it mean for me in this situation, in this corporation.
I love what you said earlier, Chris, about the reference point, that when there is a merger or we are working cross-culturally, like we lose our reference point, and that creates this discomfort. Because what I'm hearing as you talk about the archetypes is like, now we have a reference point that we can all agree on and sort of see where we fit in that new reference point.
And that reference point changes over time. As you know, I was working with a Spanish company last year with CultureTalk, and this company, IT company, was evolving very quickly. Over 10 years, it went from 20 people to 120 people with 16 different nationalities. And the executive team had their sort of legacy perspective of the company and what it was living through, whereas the staff was living something a little bit different. They were all quite young and sort of millennial, and they were there was a kind of progressive gap that was being created. Culture Talk enabled us to address the gap and say, okay, what do we have in common? How can we use what we know about this new culture after 10 years to construct a whole new set of values? And that's what they did. So
I
we
love
worked.
that. Address the gap. Somebody write that down.
Oh, sure, sure. And I think this is what we need to do today more than any other time in history, is to bridge the cultures. There are so many aspects of everyday life that is focused on differences. If we can focus a little more on similarities, and that's what Culture Talk does. That's for me the value, the true value of Culture Talk, is the fact that we can relate on a different level with people, using the framework of these 12 archetypes, which adds a bit of fun to the
Yeah.
dialogue. It adds a lot of fun, in fact.
Right.
And so when people identify with the archetypes, they can relate to stories in their lives. They can exchange on those stories. They have examples of why they feel that this archetype or these archetypes correspond more to their personality. And then they can find ways in which the company profile is also reflecting similarities to what they live. And so again, it's a way of remembering what happened. We're in such a fast-paced world that the stories are often lost. Whereas if we have a framework that allows us to focus on one or two archetypes, we can find stories for those archetypes. And that allows us to retain something essential, which is the culture and who we are, what our values are, how we function.
Yeah, and tap into the meaning, right? So there are stories that allow us to understand what are the underlying, more powerful staying power of things that have meaning to our organization, that really drive our core purpose, as opposed to things that are really tied to more of a top line surfacey exploration. Those are important too. But the staying power over time, you talked about legacy, and 10 years is a short legacy so far. You have organizations with very deep legacy and longer, years in business. And so the ability to tap into that core meaning for the organization, I think, is really powerful too.
Yeah, and I think that the more we explore the culture, the more meaning that really gives us, and a sense of purpose in what we're doing. Drucker's statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast, that I believe that's quite true. I mean, if we don't know our culture, how can we develop a strategy that people can relate to? There's no way.
Exactly.
So I think that it's a key. It's really the first key we should put in that lock to discover what we can be doing together. And for me, it's a fantastic tool. I mean, it's really something that I believe we need to discover and use more and more often.
Well, we agree with that.
I have a side question, and it's about the archetypes themselves, Chris, in terms of, sometimes people say, oh, these storylines are sort of so simple. What is it like to go in and work with a group of executives using the framework of archetype? Do you have to overcome some of that, or?
Well, I think it's one tool among many, but it certainly allows us to address a topic that not many people are so comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And so I guess you need to vary what you're doing with a team. Culture Talk will be one aspect that you can explore, but you're going to have to also have a number of other tools to complement what you're doing, and perhaps fit more closely with what they're expecting or what they're used to. So Culture Talk is a novel approach, but it's very powerful. And while it seems simple, once you start scratching the surface, you realize that there's a lot more depth to it than that. And the depth comes from people's own experience. That's what's real. I mean, the way in which these archetypes are described is thought-provoking. It isn't an absolute truth. It's a key that allows you to think about, how does this relate to me? Or how does this relate to our team or our company or our function? And in this particular situation we're in, whether it's a merger or a privatization or some kind of restructuring, we need to have that altitude, stepping back. And if we don't know who we are, I mean, fundamentally, if we can't talk about who we are, it's very difficult to know how to go forward. And the who we are in so many of these situations comes from the culture. So, thank you, Culture Talk, as far as I'm concerned, for enabling us to put words to this difficult topic, this difficult subject.
And another question I have, Chris, is in today's world, when we have to move so fast, and executives definitely want to understand the so what, now what, how is this going to impact us? Talk a little bit about the speed at which these types of outcomes can happen when you're using the archetypes.
Well, I guess the answer to that question for me would be around the opportunity, really. I mean, I do a lot of work with senior executive teams where we're in a team building or we're in some kind of a workshop around a merger. And it's a very dense moment. And so there's a lot of expectation there. And if you can address a difficult topic like culture rapidly, then you go faster in the rest of the discourse and the rest of the exchanges that you have. So you're actually bringing things down to a human level, whereas a lot of the business topics are perhaps more complex to some extent. They might be used to what people are the vocabulary people are using most of the time, but where we start basically is in the human connection. And so having established that human connection, I find it a lot easier to go forward on the other topics.
On the other stuff. Yeah, that's a great way of expressing it. The ability to start here allows everything else to sort of fall into place more easily. It doesn't make it, the challenges go away, but allows us to address those challenges.
And the question of identity is important because in a merger or in these changes, people feel they're losing their identity. So when that happens, you need to be able to express what I want to hold on to, or
what's important to me.
Yeah, and who I am. People in a change, people often feel I am being changed.
I feel a little threatened by that. Yeah.
Right. So it's important to bring it back to who I am or who we are as a team or a corporation.
Yeah. So Chris, we're coming to the end of our time, and I don't want to leave this without giving you a chance to share a recent change that you have been going through. Okay. I would love if you would take a few minutes to just share about Regen and the Talent Accelerator and what you're putting together there. So how you're bringing this unique multicultural perspective that you've developed over the course of your career to a new opportunity and a new team. Could you tell us a little bit about Regen?
Thank you, Teresa. Yes. COVID actually was a wonderful opportunity for us because with a group of colleagues, we developed this company and a platform called the Talent Accelerator, together with a Spanish company called Infova, who is one of the leaders in the Spanish world. So we've brought our talents together expatriate, an American living in London, a South African living in Spain, a Canadian living in Toulouse. And we developed this platform with, it now has probably around 200 videos, Spanish and English videos that are around leadership and management. But more importantly than the videos themselves, these videos are between 5 and 10 minutes. But more important than the videos themselves, there is a lot of associated content, articles, books that are referenced, other videos that are referenced, and exercises that people can tap into. And so in a blended, curated learning approach, we're finding we're getting a lot of appeal from people we're discussing with. So we feel that this is a new adventure, a new wonderful opportunity for us to continue doing what we love doing, and finding opportunities together with working with CultureTalk to do this kind of work in different settings, in different environments with different cultures, and exploring also how do we help cultures evolve. That's really our focus.
Such an important conversation today. And I love that you're, like you said, coming from different backgrounds, different countries, and yet it's this shared expression of how do we help cultures evolve? How do we help people, to become better versions of themselves? So we're always excited to have these conversations with our partners and to learn the, variety of ways that you're bringing these ideas to life. So thank you for sharing with us today, Chris. And we will put a link to your new venture down below in the comments so people can learn a little bit more about Regen, about the Talent Accelerator. And we'll look forward to hearing how that goes and bringing you back for another.
We'll also add a link to our CultureTalk certification program that Chris came through a couple of years ago. If you're interested in bringing these tools into your engagements or your company, we have a class coming up next week. We're kicking off October 14th. Okay. We'd love to expand it and have you join us.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.